All right, hey everyone, welcome to wonderful sunny Champaign, Illinois. The second episode of Super Baja Rey Under the Hood. We had planned to do our speed runs, but as you can see by the wonderful, lovely snow that we have here in Champaign, Illinois, and the blistering 7 degrees that it was this morning, we have scrapped the idea of doing the speed runs today, and we're gonna go inside in the studio and talk suspension. So let's head inside and get warmed up, and I can get this snow off of me. All right, we're back inside the nice warm studio here at Horizon Hobby, getting out of that wonderful snow we have outside. So as I mentioned out there, we are going to talk about suspension in the second episode of Under the Hood with the Super Baja Rey. So there's a bunch that we'll get into on the truck itself, but I want to show you guys how we've kind of broken down the shocks here and explain some of the features that really make this suspension package so plush and durable at the same exact time. So let's start with the sway bars. So we run a front sway bar, kind of mounts up in front here. I can show you that in detail later. Our rear sway bar mounts in the back, and the part that's unbelievable about that is the thickness of this is unreal. You know, it's 5 millimeters thick. It's super strong, super durable. So when you take those really harsh hits, it's not going to actually bend the sway bar. It's going to stay nice and stiff the whole time. Fully adjustable, so you could adjust that. And again, I'll show you that a little bit in more detail once we get onto the truck itself. Moving on to the shock package. This is where it gets, you know, all the cool stuff comes in and the plushness gets delivered, so to speak. So it's a bladder style system. So you've got your bladders here. As far as pistons go, we run a 5-hole piston, front and rear. And again, speaking about the durability and thickness of this, these shock pistons are 5 millimeters thick. So definitely super strong. It's going to handle all the harsh hits. You know, with the weight and the speed that this truck is going to go, it's good to have pistons that can withstand that abuse in there. Now, you can adjust them as much as you want. You could drill another hole, a 7th hole. You could do whatever you want with those pistons to make the dampening different, if that's as intricate as you want to get with it. Moving up, we've got our shock shafts. Again, 5 millimeter thick shock shafts. So this is going to take all the abuse you're going to dish at it. And then, so you don't bottom out, let's say, the pistons into the shock bladders, we've got our little limiters that we run on the shock shafts. Then moving on to the shock bodies in the whole rest of the shock package, you know, super strong aluminum, fully anodized with our custom gray color, threaded body, and we're using very large threads on here, so you're not going to take any chance of cross-threading the collars when you put them on here, and it kind of makes it a little bit easier to screw them on and off being a larger thread. Then moving on to the shock caps, again, the same aluminum that we're running on the shock bodies, so they're super tough, super durable. You know, some other manufacturers run plastic caps, and you know, with the hits that this is going to take, you definitely want to run the aluminum. You know, back to the threads. Again, we've got the bigger threads in our collars. Again, makes it easier to thread on and off, locks them in place with an O-ring inside there. And then on the bottom we've got, again, machined aluminum pieces that basically screw onto the bottom, just like this. And that kind of locks everything in place and makes it super strong and durable. Again, you know, it sounds like I'm repeating myself, but that's what the goal was with the shock package, is to make it as plush as possible, but also make it as durable as possible. And then when it comes to the springs, I mean, these things are absolutely gnarly. They're super thick. I think they're about 3 millimeter thick wire, which is going to handle, you know, all the weight and all the hard hits that this is going to take. So now that we've talked a little bit about the shock package itself and kind of the parts that make it up, you know, let's get into the truck and see what kind of adjustments we can make there. All right, starting at the front of the Super Baja Rey, we're going to take a look at the suspension and kind of talk about the different things that are available to adjust and what we can do and what we can't do. So first off, the shock position, we have 1 hole in the arm, 1 hole in the shock tower. So as far as adjustability, as far as shock position goes, basically we have none. We're kind of locked into the position that we're in. But the things that we can adjust in the front end. So we have our sway bar down here, which I mentioned earlier is a 2.5 millimeter sway bar, so pretty thick. And you got some adjustments in there where you can move the links forwards or backwards to actually tighten or put more pressure on the sway bar so that when the truck tends to lean over, it doesn't lean over as hard. It creates more pressure, so to speak, when you put the links a little bit more forwards. When they're back in their regular position, it kind of lets the truck float a little bit over to the side, but having a sway bar is going to basically prevent it from completely, tipping over on its side. So from there, we'll move on to the shocks. Okay, so like we said, the shock position is fixed, but several things we can do with the shock itself. The easiest one is adjusting the shock collar. So basically all you do is you thread it up or you thread it down, and what that's going to do is that's going to create more or less tension on the spring, which basically adjusts your ride height up and down, gets it to where you want it to be for the conditions that you're in. Again, super easy, nice big knurled collar, makes it easy to adjust. The next thing that we can do is shock oil. So from the factory, the front and rear shocks come with 30 weight oil. So you can easily go, up to 40 or 50 to make it a super stiff ride. So maybe if you're driving more on a hard packed surface or a pavement, you want a thicker shock oil so it's not going to roll over as much. But if you're running, out in the desert in a nice soft sand, you might want to drop down to a 25 weight shock oil. Then the last thing, which is probably the most difficult thing to do, and it's a lot of experimenting, is you could add holes into the shock piston itself, or, believe it or not, you can actually close up some of the shock holes, and basically what you do by that is people they'll put CA glue in the holes. So you can go from, let's say, a 5-hole piston to a 4-hole piston. Again, I don't think we've done any testing or developing with different hole sizes or different amounts of holes, but again, that's what's so cool about the RC Sport is that you can do all that, and it really, just makes it more challenging to find out what works the best for your conditions. So that covers just about everything with the front end, what you can do there. So move to the rear end of the truck and see what we can do there. So moving to the rear end of the truck. First thing we're going to talk about, just like the front, is the sway bar. Like I mentioned earlier, 5 millimeter thick sway bar in this bad boy. So 2 reasons we're doing that. Number one, the thicker the sway bar, the less roll you're going to get out of it, and the thicker the sway bar, the stronger it is. So with all the abuse this is going to take, some bad rolls, some bad flips, you're not going to tweak it out of shape, so to speak. It'll kind of hold true to its shape and withstand the abuse. You can actually loosen up the set collar and move that back a little bit, or actually move it towards the front of the truck a little bit, and that'll help stiffen the sway bar. Very little movement there, but there is some, so it will stiffen it up a little bit. All right, moving on to the rear shocks themselves. So just like the front, you've got your adjustable shock collar, which can go up or down on the shock body. 2 things that can do is it'll actually create more or less pressure on the shock spring, which will make it stiffer or softer, and it also affects the ride height of the truck. Then again, same details as the front shocks. 30 weight comes standard from the factory, but if you're going to run in a super soft, loose condition, you might want to go down to a 25. If you're running on a hard packed blue groove type track or on pavement, kind of in your neighborhood, you might want to bump it all the way up to a 40 or a 50 weight shock oil, front and back. So normally when you run shock oil in most racing vehicles, like with your TLR race vehicles, we always run at least 2.5 or 5 weight more in the front than in the rear. So if you were running, let's say you're running a 30 in the front, you might want to go 25 in the rear. That usually gives the rear end a little bit more grip, or more, let's say, it creates more of a soft situation for the shocks, which it lets the truck kind of squat down a little bit more and kind of create more grip for the truck. Same thing with the pistons. If you want to mess around with the pistons, you could do that. And really that's about it when it comes to the rear shocks, except just like the front, we've got our bump stops in there, so the whole shaft isn't going to go up and push the piston through the bladder inside the shock. So it kind of helps them form a little bit better and actually last a little bit longer before you need to rebuild it or put new fresh oil into there. So now let's talk about shock positions, because in the rear there are actually a few different things that you can do to adjust the handling, to adjust the ride height, and the overall suspension travel of the truck. So in the position that we have it in right now, we've got 2 mounting holes on the top, and we've got 2 mounting holes, on the bottom of the swing arm. So up on top, right now it's in the forward position, and it's in the forward position on the swing arm on the bottom. So basically, what that's doing is that's kind of creating the most travel possible when it comes to the truck. So you've got it all the way there, you've got it all the way in front. It's kind of letting the swing arm and the whole rear end assembly drop as low as possible, kind of, as you can see here, we're going all the way down till the frame, hits the rear end housing. So full travel in that position. Now, if you were running on pavement, you're running on high grip situations, that's where you could leave it in the front position, and you can move it to the rear position on the swing arm. That kind of brings the ride height a little bit lower. It doesn't let the truck roll over so much in the corners. And like I said, in those high grip, conditions that you're in with that, you don't want the truck high siding and tipping over or two wheeling. You want to keep it as flat as possible there. Now, the next position that you can go to is you can actually move the top to the rear position and the bottom to the rear position, and that's going to create kind of a stiffer shock yet. So even more options that you can do there. So when it comes to the truck, again, the suspension is built to be as plush and soft and the most performance possible, but yet, we built it with toughness in mind. 5mm shock shafts, 5mm pistons, you've got the bladder system, you've got everything that a full-blown race truck would have. The Super Baja Rey has it. So, this thing can go out there and soak up the biggest bumps that you can dish at it, and, won't even, we'll act like it's not even there. So that's really cool. But, so that covers just about everything when it comes to, the suspension package on here and the adjustability and the options that you have. So, hopefully, next week's episode number 3 of Under the Hood, Mother Nature will cooperate this time, and we'll get some good dry streets out there. Probably still have the snow, but as long as the streets are dry, we are going to take this bad boy and see how fast it goes. Now, to give you guys a little insight, there has been some testing behind the scenes, and I do know what it's capable of, and I think you guys are going to be absolutely blown away when you see how fast it really will go. And, technically, since it's our job, we're going to push it to the absolute limits, even if we do break it, but we're going to push it to its absolute limits, see what the top speed we can possibly get out of it. So it should be an exciting episode. Again, as long as Mother Nature cooperates, we'll be there doing it again. So until next time, see you guys later.